Hey, what's up? This is Logan Zanelli from loganzanelli.com. This is episode 2 of the blog branding project. Trying something a little bit different today. I'm working with some different camera angles, and we're going to be getting into a slideshow presentation here in a minute. I got you right here, and I got you over here too. So this should be pretty interesting to see how this turns out. As a matter of fact, you'll have to let me know what you think down in the comments here. But anyway, getting back to the project at hand. Last time I talked a little bit about what this project entailed and my rationale behind it, where the idea came from, and also talked about the name that I came up with and why I developed that name. So if you haven't seen that video, there's a link down below here. You can go ahead and click on that and watch that video. I certainly recommend that because that'll help this video make a lot more sense to you. So go ahead and do that, and don't worry, I'll still be here when you get back. Okay. Alright, so moving right along. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about research, and before I get into that I want to mention something in relation to the last video. Last time I talked about what I was going to call this project and gave it a name and all that kind of a thing. And the reason that I wanted to put that in the last video is so we would have a name to call this project in these videos. It'll make things a lot easier and make things make a lot more sense as we go along. I do, however, want to say that typically with a project like this, you don't actually want to settle on a name until you've done some of this research, because you want the name itself to resonate with your audience too. So I wanted to point that out. Make sure that with your own projects you do some of this research we're going to talk about now first before actually settling on a name, because that's really, really important. So anyway, with that said, let's go ahead and dive in here today. I'm going to go ahead and open up my computer, and we'll switch over to the computer now and go over some of the research as far as audience is concerned. Okay, so like I said, this is the blog branding project episode 2, and today we're going to be talking about audience demographics, specifically the research involved in figuring out who is your audience specifically. And the important thing to remember here is that you want to get really, really specific with this. You really want to drill down to the nitty-gritty of who you're going to be talking to. Are they fat? Are they skinny? Are they young? Are they old? Are they guys or are they gals? What type of household income do they have? What kind of cars do they like to drive? I mean, you really want to try to drill down as much as you possibly can to find out very, very specifically who your audience is, and there's a number of reasons for that. Number one, it helps you with your particular project, whether it's a blog or an actual business or product. What it does is it actually allows you to speak specifically to a very defined audience and connect with them. Matter of fact, the more you find out about a particular audience, the more that audience, when they see your stuff, is going to feel like leaping out of their chair because they're so excited that they found you. Literally, it gives them a sense of empowerment. They've come across your site or they found your product, and they get the feeling of, yes, I've finally found exactly what I'm looking for. This is exactly what I needed for whatever their problem or their need at that particular time is. So that's why it's so important to really drill down with your audience and get very, very specific about who you're targeting. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, as far as researching some of this information, there are a ton of different options. Everything from search engines to the Service Corps of Retired Executives, which is a government-run organization here in the United States, for those of you who are outside the States. Then there's also the SBA, which is a Small Business Administration, SBA.gov. Then you get into some of the business sites like Biznik, LinkedIn, and even the recently released Quora, which have forums that allow you to ask questions and get answers from people. But these are just a few of the examples. There are tons and tons more avenues that you can take to research information about your audiences. I mean, you can get into media kits for magazines, and you can get into trade associations for that particular industry. There's just tons of options of where you can get this information, most of which are free. So in relation to our project, Startup Brigade, there's a few very specific things that I want to know. One of which is, as far as my audience is concerned, are they mostly guys or are they mostly girls? Which demographic makes up the majority of what's going to be my audience? I also want to know what's their approximate age, what's their financial situation like. Do they have all the money that they need to start their business because they've been saving for years and it's been their dream, or is it something where they don't have a dime to their name and they're trying to find an investor or a partner that has cash to make their business idea a reality? What's their reason for starting a business in the first place? Is it because they got laid off and they don't have any other option, or is it because this is something they've been dreaming about their whole life and they're now ready to take that step? Also, what's the most common type of business that my audience is forming? Are they mostly going to be, techie companies? Are they mostly going to be service providers? Are they going to be making widgets? I mean, what type of business is the majority of my audience going to be involved in? And there's a few other things that I'm probably going to want to research as well, but this kind of gives you an overview of the types of things that I'm going to be looking for. So as an example research project, let's take that first question. Are they guys or are they gals? Is my audience for Startup Brigade going to be mostly men, or is it going to be mostly women? Well, let's start out with a simple Google search here. What I did is I punched in number of men versus women entrepreneurs in Google, and I know it's hard to see on your screen there, but it resulted in about 250,000 listings. Now, I went through a lot of these, and there was some good information in here, but just like any other search, you kind of have to weed through the junk to get to the good stuff. I ended up also doing some searches for some variations on these keywords, like if instead of number of men versus women entrepreneurs, I tried doing number of men versus women business owners or number of men versus women startups. And each one brought up similar results, but in each case there was a few that were new and fresh that I could check out. So that's where I started. And I want to point out something very specific. When you get into some of these search engine queries, you start looking for information in these search engines, you kind of get bombarded with a lot of stuff. And I want to point out one listing that I came across in this search specifically to point out a couple of things to pay attention to, because you can really find some gems, some real goldmine information within some of these search engines sometimes. Take a look at this listing right here. This is one of the ones that came up, and it's from emeraldinsight.com. This particular link, if you click on it, it takes you to a page where they want you to actually buy that particular journal. There is no synopsis information. It's just a publication date, the author's name, and then, buy now, basically. But if you look very carefully, the information that I'm looking for just happens to be in the description for the link. Men are twice as likely as women to be engaged in a startup activity, and the 25 to 44 age group has the highest level of involvement. Well, what do you know? Google actually took the keywords that I searched and pulled that relevant information out of that journal report without me even having to pay for it. So that's the type of thing you really want to pay attention to when you're doing these searches. Don't just read the link and click it. Read the description too. You might get the answer to your question right in the description, and it'll save you from spending money on reports and journals that you could otherwise get the information for free. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to draw your attention to is this little item right here. Now, if that's hard to see on your screen, what that says is 1999. This particular publication was published in the year 1999. So that means a couple of things. First of all, it means that this information is a bit dated. Obviously, statistics have changed significantly over the last 12 years now since this was published. So I'm going to end up taking this information and keeping it in my back pocket. It's still good information, so I'm not going to discard it entirely, but I'm also going to take it with a grain of salt and look for something that's more recent, because you always want your research to be as up-to-date as you can possibly get it. So that's another thing to watch out for when you're actually looking through results in search engines, to make sure that the information that you're actually finding is relevant and up-to-date. So there's a couple other things that we can do. Now, like I said, I wanted to look for more information that's more recent and up to date, so the next step is you can get into some of these forums that we talked about, like the business forums at LinkedIn, or the question site Quora, or the business forums at biznic.com. Those are a few examples. You can also get into other industry-specific forums and whatnot, and that's actually what I ended up doing, is I jumped on some forums and I posted the question, does anybody know or have any links to research that shows the statistics of how many men entrepreneurs there are compared to how many women entrepreneurs there are? So I went ahead and I posted that question in a couple of different forums, and here's a few of the answers that I got back. This one from Joanna says, according to the Census Bureau, which is the United States Census Bureau, women own 28.7% of all businesses nationwide. Here's another one from a lady named Leslie, who actually helps people start franchise businesses. She's helped about 250 people do that so far, and she says that she can tell you that 81% of the people that she helps are men. Okay, so that right there leads me to believe that there's a trend here, because the first one talks about just under 30% being women. The second one talks about 81% being men. So those numbers are pretty close. They match up pretty closely. So there's a little bit of a trend developing here. Now here's another one here from a Janine, who references statistics provided by the Small Business Administration and SCORE, which is that Service Corps of Retired Executives that we talked about earlier. And she says that both have the percentages somewhere around 25 to 30% of all small businesses are owned by women. So you can see that just by posting that simple question to a couple of different forums, I got my hands on some good research as far as the number of guys versus gals that own businesses. So that's a great research tactic for you, is to go ahead and post some questions in some of those forums and see what type of knowledge and even links to research that people are willing to share with you. Now, something else I happened to stumble across that I want to show you here in reference to our project is a document. It's actually a PDF report on some research that was done by the University of California on behalf of the Small Business Administration. This particular document had this chart in it, which was very, very interesting. Self-employment by owner demographic. And what this does, like I said, it's on the Small Business Administration site, SBA.gov. What this chart does is it tracks not just race, but also gender of self-employed people in the United States, and it tracks it from 1979 to 2003. So it shows the trend over those decades. And as you can see right here, the number of men that own businesses compared to the number of women that are self-employed is way higher. Like, it's more than twice as many men that are self-employed than women. Now, that again seems to match up with all the other data that we've gathered here and all the other statistics that we found. So as far as this research goes and this particular topic, are they guys or are they gals, specifically in relation to the Audience for Startup Brigade, and the topic that I'm going to be covering, well, it looks like this little guy here that I had earlier in the slideshow was pretty accurate. It looks like the majority of the Audience for Startup Brigade is going to be guys. Sorry, ladies. But it does look like most of them are going to be guys, and that's going to be very important later on, and I'll show you why as we get further along in this project. So right now I'm just going to put that on the back burner. That covers this example of audience demographic research. Obviously there's a lot more that I'm going to be doing over the coming days, and I'll be covering some of the specific information that I find out in the upcoming, the next video. But that gives you an overview of how you can glean information about your audience, find out specifics about them, and do it online at no cost. Obviously, none of that research that I did cost me any money. It was all free just by searching, through the search engines and the different forums and whatnot. Again, this is Logan Zanelli from loganzanelli.com. If you have any questions about this video or any of the others, feel free to post them in the comments below. I'd love to answer them for you. Also, don't forget to punch in your name and number, or your name and email address in the form down below to be kept up to date with this project, be alerted to when new videos go live, and then also to be notified when the Startup Brigade site actually gets launched as well. So don't forget to do that. Again, this is Logan, and I will talk to you soon.